Welcome to Chicks Who Fly, a podcast dedicated to women pilots and women in aviation. My name is Anaya, and I am your host. I am a vocalist, a DJ, and a producer, and I'm also a student pilot. I am currently working on my private pilot certificate, and while I am getting some finances in place to finish my training, I have decided to stay active in the aviation community by starting this podcast, among other things. I plan to interview and feature different women pilots and women in aviation and bring those interviews to you. And hopefully you guys enjoy the interviews as much as I enjoy spending time with these amazing ladies. In this 13th episode of the Chicks Who Fly podcast, I have a chat with pilot, hairstylist, salon owner, and host of the Cockpits and Cocktails podcast, Allyssa VanMeter, a.k.a. Fly Alyssa. Alyssa was bit by the aviation bug when she took a helicopter tour of Hawaii during a vacation there. Alyssa is currently using her COVID-19 quarantine time to study for her instrument rating. In our conversation, we address the challenges of flight training, the extraordinary pride she felt when she passed her check ride, the surprising perspective that aviation gives her in life and in flight, personal minimums, time management, the wonderful aviation community, finding opportunities in unexpected setbacks, and the importance of priorities. Alyssa also shares some of her aviation story and anecdotes, including that one time she stayed overnight in the FBO. This is a fun conversation with an awesome lady and pilot. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed chatting with Fly Alyssa. Without further ado, here is the conversation that I got to have with Fly Alyssa. Hi Alyssa, welcome to Chicks Who Fly. I'm super pumped to have you on today. How's it going?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm really excited to have you on the phone and to have a break from coronavirus talk to talk some aviation shop.
Absolutely. I think it's the only thing getting me through right now is just being able to still talk airplanes even though we're not flying.
Yes, I agree. So with that said, I wanted to start at the very beginning by asking you, how did you get interested in aviation?
Well, I guess I never went around aviation growing up. I didn't really know anybody that flew or anything, and I was on a vacation and did a helicopter, like a tour, and after I got done, and I was like, what an amazing job it would be to be a helicopter pilot and to do these tours for people because I'm very, outgoing and I love to talk to people, and so that'd be a lot of fun. Well, I looked into helicopter training and I realized it was way out of budget. So I backburnered it for a long time, and I'd say about 10 years later, I was 28, and a friend of mine was doing his private lessons in a fixed-wing airplane. He's a friend of a friend, and she's like, oh, well, come fly with me sometime if you're interested in flying. And I was like, well, does your flight school have helicopters? And he's like, what? No, you don't need to fly helicopters. He's like, just fly airplanes. And I was like, what do you mean just fly airplanes? I didn't even know that general aviation really existed. And so he shows up in this 150, this Cessna 150, and I'm like, you mean the two of us have to squeeze our butts in there? And fly this thing? Like, we were practically hugging, trying to fly, And so I went flying with them, and I thought, it'd be like, you go up, fly around for 10 minutes and land. Well, 3 hours later, we arrived back from lunch with a bunch of other pilots that we flew into this little airport and had pie and lunch and met all these pilots. And of course, I was addicted to it, and I was completely exhausted. I took a nap as soon as I got home. And that was a Friday afternoon. And on Monday, I called my local airport, which I didn't even know existed a mile from my house. And I called my airport, and they had a full-time instructor that was building time to go to airlines. And so I ended up starting lessons on that Monday, following my flight on Friday. And I never looked back. And 6 months later, I had my license.
That is crazy. You were 28?
Yeah, I was 28.
And where did you go on vacation that you took the helicopter tour?
The helicopter tour was in Lake of the Ozarks. I don't know if you're familiar with that in Missouri. So the funny thing is I guess this is a very blonde moment of me. We took this helicopter flight, and we went over Lake of the Ozarks. So I just assumed Lake of the Ozarks was just this massive round lake. So we take off and fly over the dam and the lake and everything. And I was like, well, what is this over here? And what's that? And, I'm pointing out all of these things that you've never seen from that perspective before. And he's like, well, that's all of the lake. And I was like, you mean all these like nooks and crannies and rivers and all of this is part of this lake? And he's like, yeah. And so I guess I just never seen anything from that perspective before. And I was just amazed by it. So like, well, I guess I should start seeing things from a different perspective and not just from driving around it, So, yeah, crazy.
That's fascinating. That's actually really cool. I really enjoy the story and the application of perspective from up there and into your whole life.
I find that flying, you always are going to see a different perspective of something, like something you take advantage of just seeing on a normal day driving by. I took a flight probably in the middle of my training, and it was a cross-country flight by myself. And I remember looking down, and I circled this area to figure out what this thing was. And I was like, what am I flying over it? It had like a grid of roads, and there was like lawn in between them, but there weren't buildings. And you couldn't really tell what it was. And I was flying at like 3,000 feet or something. Come to find out, it was a cemetery. Like, I guess I never fathomed, like, I never really thought about what a cemetery looked like from above it in the layout, I guess. So, pretty interesting. So, and rock quarries are my favorite thing to fly over, just because you don't get a perspective of how big it really is.
Yeah, no. When you describe all of this, I live in Palm Springs, and before that in Los Angeles, and before that in Miami, and before that in Puerto Rico. So there's not a lot of rock quarries.
Wow. Yeah. So I live in Illinois, so it's pretty flat here, and rock quarries are about the most scenic things you're gonna get.
Hey, we'll take what we have, and that's what makes it beautiful too, all the variety.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of flying, is like seeing new things and experiencing them from above instead of, ground level.
Right. It is really amazing how different everything looks from up there in ways that you wouldn't imagine until you don't get into like a small general aviation airplane.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So you take this helicopter tour, you get exposed to the 150, you go up. How did you discover that this airport was there, that school was there? And what did your training look like? You just walked in and you were like, I want to fly? Or
Yeah. So my friend that I flew with that had the 150, he lives about an hour away. And he's like, why don't you call Jacksonville Airport, which was close to me. And I guess I kind of knew it existed, but I didn't really know what happened there because they don't fly anything commercially out of there. So So I called. He's like, well, why don't you give the FBO a call, the business there, and see if they have any instructors or rental planes or whatever. And they happened to have 2 rental planes and a full-time instructor at the time. And so I was like, well, can I set up a discovery flight? And he's like, absolutely. They were running like a special. It was like a little bit discounted for a discovery flight, just to, go fly with an instructor for about an hour and see if you like it, see if it's something you really want to, dive into. And so made the appointment, went on Monday, met my instructor. We kind of did a little bit of a ground school on just like the basics. And then we went and flew for about an hour. Well, he kind of let me play around and have the controls at some point. And he's like, wait a minute. And he's like, have you flown an airplane before? And I was like, well, Friday, I just learned Friday. But, we flew for 3 hours in a 150, so it was kind of slow,
What were you flying in this school?
The school has a Piper Archer and a Piper Warrior. So we were flying the Warrior, which I did most of my training in. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun. And, the instructor was very laid back, so that was nice. And, yeah, so then I started training with him. I would go to lessons 2 to 3 times a week because inevitably the weather would be crummy 1 or 2 of the days. So if you had 3 set up, then you'd at least get 1 in, hopefully. So I tried to at least go once a week mandatory just to keep up on everything. And then we'd do a little bit of ground school, and then we'd go into our flight portion. And then I would go straight to work after that. So for the most part, it was really great. There were days that were very taxing on your mind, and then I'd have to go to work for 10 hours after that. So,
right. Sorry, what were you doing for work at the time?
I'm a hairstylist. I own a salon. So I've done that for 12 years. And in the middle of my private training that I opened my own salon. So not only was I throwing money out the window flying, I was also spending it opening a salon. So it was a lot of stress on me for studying at home and flying and opening a salon, and just all of the things kind of hit all at once, which I'm sure you can relate to.
God. Yeah, but that's a lot, and you were just going for it. I'm so impressed that you're 28, you're opening a salon, you're suddenly just discovered flying and going for it. I mean, that's pretty balls to the wall. That's cool.
Yeah, it was a very interesting changing point of my life. When I was doing my training, I still only knew my flight instructor, my friend that took me up in the 150, Roberto, and a few people that he kind of introduced me to in aviation. But other than that, I didn't know anybody. So I was still kind of in this sheltered, small airport life until I think a year later at least. And then everything kind of blossomed. So now my world is filled with aviation.
That's freaking awesome. And you said that your airport was Jacksonville. Was this Jacksonville, Florida?
Jacksonville, Illinois. So the capital of Illinois is Springfield, and we're kind of centrally located. We're about an hour and a half from St. Louis and about 4 hours from Chicago.
Gotcha. I've crossed the country 4 times by car, but I haven't gotten to every nook and cranny yet.
Yeah, well, Illinois is, not much to see on the ground. It's a lot of fun to fly in an airplane and go to Chicago for the day, or, St. Louis. I couldn't tell you how many times I've done arch flybys for people because that's one of the, sightseeing things to see around here. So that's a lot of fun. Just beautiful farmland here.
That sounds awesome, and it's definitely a kind of terrain that I have not had the opportunity to fly over yet. But maybe during my current journey, I can eventually meet up with you and fly with you.
Absolutely. Come up anytime.
Thank you. So What did you find the most challenging about learning to fly an airplane?
The most challenging thing, I would say, was the paperwork. There's a lot of rules and regulations, and keeping proficient with that is probably still, a little challenging at times. Your life's on the line. Other people's lives are on the line. And I'm not scared to fly by any means, but at the same time, you have to, have calculated risk. You just have to stay up on those kind of things and be aware that, every time you take off in the airplane, you need to know that your airplane is flying correctly and everything was functioning well, and also that you're proficient enough to take care of the airplane. So I have a lot of guidelines that I give myself for actual flying. It's like, you only have to have 3 landings, takeoff and landings during the day to have passengers. But if those 3 takeoff and landings haven't been for 2 weeks, I'm not going to fly anybody else. I want to make sure that I'm proficient and that kind of thing. But I think just the struggle was the paperwork. I've never been book smart per se. I'm very hands-on. I'm very artistic, very, you can give me anything and I can try to figure out how to do it. And I usually am successful at that. But for me to, study and, pass tests, I think you have to get a 75 or 70 or something above, for the written portion. And then, the test anxiety that comes along with your check ride is very stressful.
Right. So are you a nervous test taker?
Absolutely. I think it's more of I have a fear of failure. It's not necessarily the test itself. I just put a lot of pressure on myself to not fail at something or be good at something. And, the hands-on portion of flying is not really that complicated. It's more the, knowing at what altitudes to fly and how everything works with the airplane that I found a little more complicated.
Right. And how did you do on your written exam, and how did you prepare for that?
So a lot of my written was done on my own. We did some ground school with my flight training, so very minimal. Just to get an understanding of something and then go fly it. I did the Gleam, or whatever you want to call those books. And then I did some downloaded apps for checking and the questions to kind of prepare for that. I also had bought a private pilot check ride audiobook from M0A at the time. It's you can't study and look at a book while you're driving, but I was driving so often when I was doing my test that I wanted to utilize that time. So I bought the audiobook and would listen to that on my drive.
I have it, and that's exactly why I bought it. And in fact,
it's very helpful.
It really is. And actually M0A, their online ground school is how I prepared for my written, and I got an 87.
That's great.
I thought it was 86, but the other day I found my paper and I realized it was an 87. I'm like, great, one more point.
Yeah, I'll take any of it, and I don't even remember what I got on my written test for my private, but I remember it wasn't 100. I don't know how your testing was, but they have to either video record it or have someone in the room watching so that you're not cheating or anything. And the guy was sitting directly behind me while I was taking it, so I felt like he was judging every answer that I was putting in. And so I felt a little bit pressured and rushed. And so I finally I got through all of the tests, and then I marked the numbers that I wanted to go back to. But then I felt just so pressured, and I was just like, okay, I'm done. So I passed, and that was fine. But now I'm into my instrument training, and I realized that I don't need to just memorize things. I need to actually learn them and learn how everything works and work towards that knowledge, and being proficient.
Right. I'm not good at rote memorization because I don't just accept any given proposition blindly. Like, I need to understand. Like,
Exactly.
even when being given direction, I'm not like sure whatever you say. Like, if it doesn't make sense to me what's being asked from me, I ask why. Not to be, rude or difficult or whatever, but I have a huge dislike of wasting my time.
Exactly. And I found that, like, time management during all of it, with studying, working full time, flying, being able to afford flying, all of those things add up. So you really have to time manage. And for me, if I'm wasting my time and not, really focused on what I'm doing, and that's kind of why I pushed off my instrument until now. During, quarantine of coronavirus, I'm sitting, 3 hours a day doing instrument, lessons because I have the time. But before, I'm working 12-hour days to be able to afford flying and everything else. Now I'm unable to do that, so I might as well use my time wisely. And, I'm all about, like, efficiency and time management.
I experienced that challenge too, very similarly. But now during coronavirus, I'm actually moving. I just wanted to make a powerful decision, not a decision based out of fear. It's really challenging because I convinced my husband to buy a trailer with me and move into like a teeny trailer for a while. And it's like really exciting because we've been wanting to be nomadic and be traveling and experiencing life in a different way than we have been. But I've been waiting to be ready, and this was not the way we wanted to do it. So I think that's what's scary about it. But nonetheless, I wanted to find an opportunity in all of this for me. So
exactly. Yeah, I've been, honestly thinking in this time, I'm kind of somebody that doesn't sit still very well. I'm always doing something, and, I kind of joined the regime to make, 1,000 masks for aviation, for free, and so we're doing that. So that's keeping me really busy.
Oh, wow.
But in the same thing, like, I'm thinking in this time, like, how can I alleviate these risks later in life if this were to happen again or something? So, how do I lessen my bills? How do I lessen, and I've often thought, I should get an RV and just live in it, and, I'm kind of that traveler, free spirit, like, it's like I have a lot of stuff right now, but I could totally minimize. And I'm like, is now the time to do that? It's scary, but it's also like kind of freeing. And I've also, thought about a career change with something in aviation. Obviously, aviation is having a hard hit right now, but I think we're going to come out on top of that eventually. And maybe now is the time to really put my eggs in the basket of learning and making sure I get my commercial and instrument done and move on to something else in the near future, I think times like now just kind of make us step back and think.
Yeah, basically, you and I did the same thing. We're taking a step back and we're reevaluating the course because I was on track, right? I had just scheduled a bunch of lessons and I had to cancel them like a day or two after I made them because that's when we started like losing our income. And I realized, well, the reason I moved out here to Palm Springs was to complete my flight training. So maybe now things are going to look a little bit different. And I think that you are going to like the rest of our plan. And again, I don't know if I told you this when I was on Cockpits and Cocktails, but our plan is to drive our house to the East Coast eventually and buy a boat to live aboard.
Yeah, and you did say that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we want to sail down to Uruguay. So, making a bunch of cool stops in between. And so now getting from here to there is going to look differently. It's going to take a different route than it would have taken had I just been able to finish my training here in the way that I had planned. But I don't know. I'd love to get in the RV and visit like Kristen Blocker up, who's one of the pilots that I previously interviewed on Chicks Who Fly, and like fly with her, and then go to like New Mexico and fly with Christy McFadden, who's another pilot that I interviewed. And like, I'd love to stop and maybe visit the Gift Academy because I had Tamara Griffith on. I don't know. Maybe now it could be like something more fun. And then Twin and I now have the weekly vlog, you know, sharing our journey to going nomad, but simultaneously, maybe I can be making like really cool video content for Chicks Who Fly as opposed to just the interviews that I enjoy, but it's, you know, another medium.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's the craziest thing. I said, you know, I was on a trip when all of this happened. I was in Europe, and so I got back and I was immediately quarantined. And so I've been home, and I'm going to be home for 2 months. You know, if they keep pushing it back and I'm off another month, I said, you know, I think I'm just going to take my cash and get in my car and drive. I don't know where, but I'm going to drive and I'm going to camp. I love camping, hammocking, doing all of those things. And I, through aviation, have met so many amazing people. And I honestly could probably drive across the entire United States and never not know somebody in all of the places, you know. So it's really, you know, I could camp in their yard. I could, you know, hang out. I could go fly, you know, just whatever. You know, I don't know what that looks like, but it's like, you know, I think you always have to reevaluate your situation and see what serves you at the time and what works and go for it, you know. And you have to have a little bit of a free spirit and a mind that's constantly changing to like kind of do that. But, you know, the more and more I get older and live a little bit more, I understand kind of how my brain works and how I can make it all work. You know, it's like somehow I'm living on, you know, enough money for 2 months when before I would have blown it all in like a week, you know?
Right, yeah.
So, you know, I can't get deliveries from Amazon every day, but you somehow make it work when you have to, you know? So,
yeah. That's
yeah.
where we are too. I've discovered a lot about myself throughout this process. Like I've discovered, if I really look closely at myself, like I have like a burning need constantly to make everything beautiful. And the reaction that I have when I live in a place that's not beautiful and functional and organized, it's like I feel like somebody's killing me. I know that sounds ridiculous and like a totally first world problem, but this is like, I've been doing music my whole life, but part of the reason I love music is because it makes things beautiful. It creates a beautiful ambiance. You know?
Absolutely. You know,
and that's what I do when I make music. I'm not the person to call if you want to party and shake your booty.
No, me neither. You know, it's like every morning I wake up, I make coffee, I kind of go through my routine of letting my dogs out and doing all of those things. But you know, in all of this, everybody's like, oh, what TV shows are you watching? And I was like, I've only turned on my TV once in this whole process, the whole time. I do not watch TV. I honestly am always like, hey, play music, you know, to my Alexa. Can't say her name or she'll start talking to me. But
got it.
So I live through music, and it might be some booty dance and stuff, but that's just, you know, to clean the house and, you know, whatever. But it's just more like I love music and the brightness that it gives you, or the mellowness that it kind of calms your soul. Music is definitely something that helps me through a lot of things. So
yeah. I like connecting with people who are in aviation that are also creative, not just the kind of people who do like the most traditional kinds of jobs or have the most traditional perspective, because that perspective's a lot more out there, and it's not the one that I most connect with.
Exactly.
Right. So I actually wanted to ask you, what was your favorite thing about learning to fly?
I think I didn't realize it at the time, but my favorite thing about learning to fly was, you know, as a young kid and things in high school and college, you always have things to base your, like, how good you are at things. Like, you know, if you're good at sports or you're good at playing a musical instrument, or you're always getting graded on your academic things, where as an adult, you really don't have those things. You know, you work, but it's money. I mean, you know, you have to. Where aviation for me, when I was learning, it was when I finished and I got my private license, I cried the entire way home because I was so proud of myself. I've never been so proud of myself than the day that I finished my check ride. And you know, I did it on my own. No one helped me. I mean, yes, I had instructors. Yes, I had people that, you know, helped me study or something, but nobody did it for me. It wasn't a combined effort. You know, you win a baseball game and you had all these friends that, you know, played with you and helped you. But aviation, like, I did it on my own, you know, and so it just made me be very, very proud of myself. So.
Yeah, as you well should be. And it's true. Nobody can take the test for you. Nobody can do the maneuvers, like perform the maneuvers. Nobody can go through that oral part, which for so many people is the most grueling. It's a lot. And like you said, the time management and the organization and the level of studying that it takes to achieve a result. For me, studying for the written exam, I couldn't believe how much I had to study just to get an 87. Like, I'm used to doing better with a little less effort, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you know, it really makes me smile, like seeing, you know, women not, you know, I love to see young people involved in aviation, but, you know, it's like young people, they're either going to go to college or they're going to go to a trade or they're going to go to the military. They're going to do something. You know, for you and I to be older and be like, I want to fly an airplane, I think it takes that much more effort because we already have our career. We have our, you know, you have children, you have a career, you have, you know, bills to pay. You have all these, like, things on your shoulders that you carry every day, but then you add on one more thing. And so it really makes me happy to see people that are older in aviation doing this and doing it for themselves and not, you know, just as a career path.
Yeah, totally. Like, I was convinced, like, the reason I started doing this was basically because I wanted to do something else that I loved as much as I love music for a living. But I can see this as a part of my life in so many ways, and not just necessarily one or the other. Were your friends and family supportive when they realized you were learning to fly an airplane?
My mom was very nervous. I really couldn't talk to her about it because it scared her a lot. Actually, the day that I did my solo, you know, my first solo, I had called her that morning and I talked to her and she knew I was like going to fly. She knew I was going to work that day. And I was just like, oh, I just wanted to catch up, you know, before I go to my lesson. And then I didn't realize I was going to solo. My instructor just like had me fly some, you know, do some landing, some pattern work. And then he got out. So I had no idea that he was going to do that. And so I called her afterwards and I was like, hey, Mom, guess what I did today? And she's like, what? And I was like, I soloed the plane, which my mom had no idea what that meant. She's like, well, with the instructor in there, right? And I'm like, no, Mom, I landed the plane. I flew the plane all by myself and I didn't die. So she's like, is that why you called me this morning? Did you know you were going to fly? Because did you think like something could have happened? And I'm like, Mom, I had no idea. No, that is not why I called you, you know? And so, you know, my boyfriend at the time was supportive, for the most part. it kind of became not supportive at the end of it because I was spending so much time flying and studying that it took a lot out of our relationship. So that kind of hurt that in a way. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, I had the support. I think more people thought it was cool than anything. But, you know, I think now it's more everybody's like aware that they can do it as well. Like if Alyssa can go fly, you know, I wasn't a student. I wasn't top of my class. I'm not this spectacular person, or I'm just me, you know, and I'm just average Joe flying a plane, you know. So I think it's definitely like made me try to reach other people in our small community and kind of show people that you can still follow your dreams and do these things, even if it's 10 years later in life.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So right now what you have is your private.
Correct. I have my private license, and I have about 250 hours. And so it'll be 3 years in May that I started flying. And then I got my license in November.
And are you still flying Pipers?
Yeah, I'm in a part of a club that has 4 airplanes, and we have 2 Piper Archers, Cherokee 6, and a 172. So
cool.
A little fleet. So
what's your preference, a high wing or a low wing?
My preference out of those 4 would definitely be the Archers, just because I'm very, very comfortable in a low wing. But the more I fly, I really love the kind of the backcountry bush flying. And I've had the opportunity of flying a Scout and a Denali Scout made by American Champion. And so if I had to choose anything, that would probably be it for my daily, everyday plane, which is a high wing and, you know, some bush wheels on it. And I would probably fly that over anything just because they're tail wheel and, you know, have a little bit of power, and you can go cross country and it's pretty comfortable. You know, there's no autopilot or anything, but we flew a Scout from Idaho back to Illinois, and it was about a 9-hour flight, and we stopped twice for fuel, and it was pretty comfortable even flying that long. So
cool.
Yeah,
that is a long flight. And you did it all in one day just with the fuel stop?
So we flew out in the afternoon, and we were flying through mountains in the first section. So we actually we flew about 3 hours and then landed in Wyoming, in Laramie, Wyoming. And we stopped there for fuel, and we ended up sleeping in the FBO because it was really cold outside. We brought all our camping gear, but we were freezing. So they let us sleep in the FBO. And then we got up the next morning, waited for the plane to kind of thaw out a little bit from the frost. And then we took back off, and we flew to Omaha, and I believe it was Omaha, and then back to Springfield. So kind of in one day, but we stayed overnight. So
yeah, but that's a really cool story. You got to sleep in the FBO.
Yeah, and they just built it. It's a brand new FBO, and they had these 2 pilot rooms that were just kind of like closets that had like either a recliner or like this like lay down kind of cot bench thing. And so shout out to Cowboy Aviation in Laramie. They let us sleep in there, and actually I woke up the next morning, and the bathrooms for the FBO were not at the back, so you had to go all the way like through the lobby to the front, and I didn't realize they had a flight going out that morning because they do have some commercial flights. And so there was a guy working the line at the front desk, and I'm like running around in my leggings and my tank top. You know, I was completely covered and like, you know, presentable, but I was like, oh, I didn't realize anybody was up this early. And so he had already made us coffee and, you know, offered us a few snacks, you know, in the morning. And they gave us a courtesy vehicle to go into town that night and eat dinner. And yeah, so like I've found that there's so many like people willing to help you and be kind, you know, flying all around the world. in aviation, you know. Everybody that is into airplanes definitely wants to help other people. So.
It's true. Maybe we should do a mooch talking and flying tour around the U.S.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's how we're going to start. I'll tell you what, I'm grateful being such a newbie because, see, you already have this, you know, adventurous streak. I am adventurous, but I have to say, like, I've always been like a very comfortable type of way of traveling and situation. I mean, I fly economy, but I mean, like, I stay and I haven't done much camping. And this is totally a way to face my fears and expand like a bunch of things about myself, because I think that I'm capable of a lot more than I've allowed myself.
Oh, totally. I think it took someone else showing me kind of a nicer way of camping. It took that to really make me love it. You know, and most people go camping and they take like hot dogs or something and, you know, put them over a fire. I'm not that girl. Like, I want gourmet luxury meals over the fire, and there's a way of doing that, you know. And so I bought this camping gear and like, you know, camping stoves and things that I really enjoy camping, and I've kind of got it down to a science now. And I think the biggest thing about aviation is like, I am so excited to fly and camp and do all of those things kind of simultaneously together, and figuring that out, because it just leaves everything open, and it's just such a more affordable way of travel than hotels and things. And I used to be the same way. Like, I come from a small town. My family never really traveled. We didn't have the money. And so now I've found ways to travel that's very affordable. And so, you know, even before coronavirus hit, you know, I had taken 6 trips from January 1st till this all began. So I was on 6 vacations. So, you know, it's like, I love to travel and explore and adventure. And so you just have to find ways to make it affordable, because I'm not rich. I'm very not that.
Right.
So.
And to that point, the trailer that we bought is nice. It's in good condition and all of that, but a lot of these trailers have like the freaking ugliest wallpaper and just not the best design choices. So even though there are a million things that I'd like to do, like I want to put up a wall accent on one side, at the very least, I want to paint the walls and redo the floor.
I understand. Like, but I think with like you and I we're both like kind of innovative, and you can make it work. So it's like, okay, do we paint it? Do we do something different? You know, you just kind of have to make it your home and make it something you love, you know, and especially being in a small space, you just kind of have to make it yours.
100%. And before we lived in this apartment, which I guess the reason why this move is so difficult is because our apartment is perfect. Like, the amount of space, having gotten to spread out and have certain things accessible that we always used to have to keep in storage. And, you know, our cats are happy and they can run around and they have a balcony, like that kind of stuff. Our life really works here. So, but yesterday we spent like hours in the trailer. The trailer is here in the parking lot of this building, and they're letting me do it because they know I'm moving into it, and it only takes up 1 parking space. It really is tiny. And we went in, we washed all the walls with degreaser, we taped up everything, stored away all the cushions in the bathroom so that the paint that we ordered comes in on Thursday, and then we can get to work on that. And I need to order like the flooring. And the great thing about it being so little is that it takes very little materials. So,
yeah,
you know, I'm all about making it beautiful. And I know that the day that I buy my plane, I'm going to be making some modifications, and like I can't not design it. I just realized how much that's completely like in my blood.
Yeah, I get it.
Getting back to aviation, what is the favorite flight that you've ever flown, either as a passenger or a pilot?
I would say I went to Alaska I was actually going to Alaska with my ex's mom, and we were doing a triathlon together. It was an all-women's triathlon in Alaska, and so I was like, hey, I was on like Pilots of the USA or something Facebook page, and I was like, hey, is there anybody in Anchorage, Alaska that's a pilot that wants to go flying? I'll pay for fuel. I'd love to go fly. And this guy piped up and was like, I'd love to take you, and so like we got to know each other for like a month, trying to feel him out, see what his experience was, and, that he wasn't some total creep. And so we got to know each other and we became really good friends, and him and his fiance, we all flew to the Talkeetna fly-in Alaska, and we also flew to the Knik Glacier and landed out at the picnic strip at the glacier. So, off the airport landing, like it was amazing in his mall. So I would say that was my, like, besides flying into Oshkosh on my own, that was my favorite flight. Oshkosh was terrifying, but it was fun. So
I hear that exact description from different people. So I have to believe you. One day I'll get to see it for myself.
You definitely need to. You definitely need to at least drive up for it. It's just something I can't even explain to see in person. Like I had went to Sun and Fun, and in 2018 I ended up flying into Oshkosh 2018. 6 months later or 5 months later or whatever it is, and in my own airplane, and I only had like 85 hours with a private pilot's license. So, hey, it's pretty scary anyways, and then throw that all into the top of it, it was a little bit scarier. So, yeah, it was a lot to handle, but I definitely recommend everybody see Oshkosh, whether you drive in, fly in, whatever the case. It's 10 times what you'll ever dream it up to be and more.
Okay, so. I'm sold. I guess this year it's canceled probably, so next year maybe.
They haven't canceled it yet, but we'll see what happens for sure.
Yeah, when is it scheduled to be?
July, the end of July.
So maybe by then.
Maybe, yeah. I wonder, like, what stipulations they're going to keep in place that will restrict it. I'm not really sure. So.
Yeah, this is completely uncharted territory for everybody. So.
Yeah, totally. I think nobody knows what's going to happen in 2 weeks, let alone 2 months. So I think it's just keeping an open mind that's ever changing, and with a world that's ever changing, and, adapting to your situation and making the most of it. Because, I'm trying to make the most of being off work right now. It's, I can't work, but I can do a lot of other things to help people and study and do those kind of things. So
I wanted to ask you also, have you ever had a moment where you've scared yourself, or that you've had a scary moment during a flight or during your training? And then if so, what did you learn from that situation?
I would say knowing your minimum, there are minimums for flying, but what are your personal things? My boyfriend at the time, I took flying one night, and it was, the winds were gusting to like 25. And I was like, it's gusting down the runway. It'll be totally fine. We're just going to fly over to dinner and fly back. The wind is supposed to calm down by, in a couple hours. So we just need to get over there, and then it'll be fine. We'll fly home. Well, I took off, and I was like, I'm going to do like one landing here at an airport I'm comfortable with. and just get, a feel for the wind. And so I did, and I was just kind of getting tossed around, and I went to land, and I did a go around because I was like, it just didn't feel comfortable. So I did a go around and, climbing back out, full power, and, I got everything set. And so I went ahead and took the flaps out. I didn't realize that I wasn't ready to take the flaps out yet. I needed to gain a little bit more airspeed, get a little bit more, and then take them out. And I was thinking very quickly, and I was like, oh gosh, oh gosh, oh gosh. And it's like, why am I not climbing? Why am I not climbing? And so I just kind of had this moment of panic. And so I threw some flaps back in and kind of stabilized things. And I wasn't trying to climb, because that's when you get yourself in a pinch is, you increase your angle of attack because you want to go higher, but you need speed and you need lift. And and so I think I could have gotten myself in a very sticky situation there. So, it's getting too slow and spinning, so it was scary. And I just realized at that point that knowing your own personal minimums and wins and things is very crucial. And knowing, what you will accept as, a good flying day, or what you can handle. So.
Yeah. That's actually a very good point, because your personal minimums have to be very defined to you, and they have to be hard set, for them to really keep you safe.
Yeah, and learning in, the IFR world right now, you might be able to go down to 400 feet as your minimum altitude for, an ILS approach or something. But, if you're not comfortable with getting to 400 feet and doing a go around, and doing a missed approach, then, that's scary. So you're going back into the soup. So, it's like, that will not be my personal minimum,
Right.
If I have to shoot approach down to minimums, I'm probably going to go to my alternative airport.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, that's really important. I had another pilot that I interviewed previously on the podcast, Christina Pascucci, and she was talking about the fact that her DPE during her private pilot check ride told her, if you had not gone around when you came in for this landing, I would have failed you. You passed because you did a go around. So
yeah, that's
important, man. I've seen, even when I was working at the FBO here at Bermuda Dunes, that's a job that I held on to the longest, but, finally got laid off from when it got, slow and crazy with the coronavirus stuff. But I remember seeing a citation come in for a landing and do a go around,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's like there's no shame in, it's actually being a good pilot.
Yeah.
Knowing when to go around. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's it's not like what the FAA recommends or what you see as their minimums. Maybe you're not proficient enough to fly their minimums. Maybe you're better than that, but you just have to know what those are. And I have them written in my, in my logbook, because, sometimes you need that extra, hey, maybe it's, it's safer to be on the ground than in the air, and wish you were on the ground, So, yeah, I don't like to be in those situations. I've landed airplanes where the wind had picked up, and, it's gusting 20, 30 miles an hour, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. So it's like, yep, you just have to know what your airplane can handle, what you can handle, and always practice safe measures. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good point. Is there a specific kind of airplane that you're dying to fly, or a type of rating that you're really looking forward to getting?
So I've flown a seaplane for about 2 hours, and I'd love to finish that rating, but I told myself I couldn't pay for the rating until I had my commercial, so that I didn't have to take a commercial seaplane check ride if I did ever do that. So it's kind of my incentive to myself once I'm done with my commercial that I'll go get my seaplane rating. But honestly, I'm still kind of set on getting my helicopter. So I think that add-on to my commercial will be what I truly am excited about. So
yeah, that sounds awesome. I'd be totally into both of those things. Those are the two that I get excited about too.
yeah, and maybe hopefully one day we'll be all so rich that we can just have our own helicopters, right?
Yes, I'll drink to that. Only 8 hours before flying or more.
Yeah.
What was your favorite thing about flying the seaplane? Like, what was that like?
It was just so much fun to be like land and sea, and we were just like hopping around ponds and streams and just all these places. It was in Florida that I flew, and the maneuverability on the water and figuring out what way the water was actually going so that you understood the wind, because there's not wind socks at every lake, so you have to understand what the water looks like and what way the wind is going. And so that was kind of fun to kind of challenge yourself. And we went like gator spotting. We were looking for gators in Florida. And so we were low level flying and, just hopping around on the water. And it was just, the windows, we were flying in a Cub. So we had the window down or the door open or whatever. And it was amazing. Like, I love the feeling of having an open cockpit. So that definitely appeals to me.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I've been saying that's my dream, like living in a boat close to a seaplane port where I can like go and fly and then come and live on the boat. And plus, I'm sure learning how the water, behaves will be useful. Will cross over between a seaplane and a boat, as well as the docking stuff and all that.
Yeah, totally.
So I guess the last thing I wanted to ask you is, do you have any advice or anything that you want to leave any student pilots or aspiring pilots with?
I honestly would just tell them to make a community of positive and good aviators around yourself, so that when you're feeling down or when you're feeling like it's impossible, that you have somebody to talk to and you have a group of women or people to talk to. That has been the most crucial thing keeping me going for my instrument and my commercial, because it's so easy to give up because we have a million other things on our plate. But when we love something so much, it's hard to just let that go out of our mind. So I think it's definitely just making a group of positive people around you in the aviation world. It's so easy to do. And, I'm always here to encourage and help other people through this journey. So, yeah, just reach out and get that for yourself set up.
Amazing. Very good stuff, for real. Thank you. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. And
absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
God. My pleasure.
And that concludes the conversation that I got to have with Allyssa VanMeter, a.k.a. Fly Alyssa. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here at Chicks Who Fly. We really enjoy doing this podcast for you. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider following us on Spotify and subscribing on YouTube, as well as sharing with all your friends who might enjoy this podcast as well. Also, if you would like to be more intimately involved with the creation of this podcast, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon at Chicks Who Fly. You can reach us at chickswhoflyofficial@gmail.com and on our website, chickswhofly.com. Thank you so much once again, and we look forward to spending some more time with you on the next episode of Chicks Who Fly.